Hello everyone! Wanted to not just talk through some jungle paths that the pro junglers are currently using in solo games and competitive games. Yeah, I think it's really helpful to understand how junglers path, no matter what role you're playing. As a laner, you need to understand when the junglers could gank you, and as a jungler, you need to understand, if you can invade, if you're being invaded, if you're expecting the enemy jungler to counter gank, that kind of thing. So super important. I'd say junglers dictate the pace of the early game almost sole-handedly. I think supports are also pretty OP, but they don't really get a chance to influence the map until usually they're first base. I'll go over a few different paths in this video. So even if you're unfamiliar with jungling, I think everyone knows at a basic level, you can full clear as junglers. So if you're starting blue, it'll be blue, Gromp, Wolves, Raptors, Red, and then Krugs. So sorry about my numbers here, but that's a typical full clear path if you're starting blue. If you're starting red, it'd be red, Krugs, Raptors, Wolves, and then Gromp or blue. Matters slightly for 5 and 6, but that's a general idea. Yeah, that's the core of full clearing. What are the benefits of full clearing? So almost always it's the fastest way to clear all your camps as a jungler. That's really the main benefit. But there's a lot of cons associated with full clearing. The downside is that your pathing is very linear, right? So the next respawn of the camps, it's going to be, Gromp, Wolves, Raptors, Krugs, right? So you're always moving from top to bot. That's just how the camps are going to respawn. The issue with that is it's a lot more telegraphed where you're going to be at any given moment. After the initial Krug camp clear, you're going to wait for the Scuttle Crab spawn, right? Because it's about to be 3:30. After the Scuttle Crab, if you have nothing to gank, you're going to recall, right? Buy some items. You have to go to your Gromp because that's the next camp that's spawning. If the enemy jungler knows the path you took, it's very obvious where you're going to be in the next minute and a half. So I'd like to go over some, alternative starting paths that you can take. The first is starting Raptors, and there are certain champs that are a lot better than others at starting Raptors. Talia's being one, for example. Lee Sin, pretty good with his E. Jax with his E. These champs are pretty good at starting Raptors because they have AoE damage. And what's the benefit of starting Raptors? So by starting Raptors versus a red buff or a blue buff, the camp is a lot easier to clear because it's not a buff, right? It's like a minor camp, if you want to call it. It's a lot faster to clear, meaning you'll hit level 2 earlier than if you were to clear one of the buffs instead. So that's benefit number one. The second benefit is that because you're starting Raptors, it's going to be the first camp that respawns. It respawns at about 4 minutes to 4:05, something like that. After you clear Scuttle Crab, you'll see that, he obviously doesn't go to Raptor Camp this game, but you'll see that the Raptor Camp spawns pretty shortly after. So, the idea is you clear Scuttle Crab, you can look for something mid. Whether something mid happens or not, you can just go directly to your Raptors after, and then you can get under the camp. And it's actually more than just the Raptor camp. Typically, if you start Raptors, you will clear that side of camps first. So the red buff and Krugs. The order depends a little bit on what you want to do, but you'll see that Krugs is his third camp that he clears. So after you kill Scuttle, you could walk back to Raptors, clear Raptors, and then the next camp that spawns is Krugs. So in the long run, you're clearing more camps faster. So typically the first recall would happen after the first Scuttle Crab. If there's nothing to gank, you would just reset. You'd spend your money. You have about 850 gold. If you don't buy the potion, 900 gold. So let's say you have 900 gold after the first Scuttle Crab, given there's no gank opportunities. Versus by starting Raptors, you are able to farm one more Raptor camp, one more Krugs camp, and then you can get your first recall off. So it's about, I don't know the exact number, it's probably 1100-ish gold. So your first recall is a lot stronger, and then you have 2 extra camps in the bag for your jungle item. So that's the second advantage of starting Raptors is, you get a little bit more golden XP before your first base. The third advantage is that your red buff duration is going to be a little bit longer. And red buff is by far the most broken buff in the early game, just because of the slow and then the dot damage. It's by far 10 times better than blue buff as a jungler. Couple things to note with starting Raptors. You really want to pay attention to what the bot lane matchup is, right? So after you clear the first Raptor camp, you have the option of going directly to red and then Krugs, or doing the opposite, going to Krugs as your second camp and then red as your third camp. So what are the advantages to each? If you go red as your second camp and then Krugs, you're going to end up in this exact situation in the VOD where you finish clearing your Krugs and you have a couple decisions to make. So you can gank bot right now. That's number one. You can invade his bot side jungle. That's option number 2. Or you can go all the way back to your wolves. That's option number 3. The benefit of going Raptors Red, and then Krugs is that you do options 1 and 2 a lot faster. You know, it's the most efficient way of clearing. So if you want to help your bot lane early, this could be a very viable option. In this game in particular, option 1 makes a lot of sense, right? Because he has Nautilus, who is an engaged support. So Nautilus can set up ganks quite easily for Talia. Option 2, this game is a coin flip, right? Because you don't know where the enemy jungler started. The enemy jungler could have very well started his blue buff, and then he's pathing top. So if you walk straight to the enemy blue buff, you don't even know whether it's up or not. If it's down, you wasted so much time. Option 2 in this game is not a viable option. If we rewind the footage, his teammate placed a ward on his red buff, so you actually know that Lee Sin's bot camps are up. Theoretically, you could go with option 2. The problem with option 2 right now is your bot lane and your mid lane don't have prowl. You'll see in a sec. Mid lane definitely doesn't have prowl, right? You can just tell on the minimap straight away the Karma is pushing Aatrox in. Take a look at bot lane here. Your bot lane doesn't have prowl either. So if you were to go with option 2 here and the Lee Sin finds you, then you're in trouble because none of your teammates can help you. Going back to option 1, yes, the gank setup is there with Nautilus hook, but the problem is the Nautilus is level 1, right? So he actually skill W here. But even if he had hook here, your bot lane is behind on levels. They haven't hit level 2 yet, so the follow-up is not really there. There's probably a big enemy creep wave built up, so it's makes it very, very hard to gank the enemy bot lane here. And that leaves you with option 3. So going all the way back to your top side, clearing the camps there. The other path I mentioned was going Raptors, Krugs, and then Red. What's the difference between this path and the path I just described beforehand, where you went Red, Raptors, Krugs? This path is slightly less efficient in terms of clear speed, right? Because you have to walk from your Raptors all the way to Krugs before coming back to your red buff. But the benefit is that you have a higher red uptime. And red buff, like we said earlier, is the most broken buff in the early game for junglers. The second benefit is that by clearing Krugs second, your Krugs camp will respawn a little bit sooner than if you were to do Raptors, Red, and then Krugs. Meaning that after that first Scuttle Cloud period that we talked about, the Raptor camp would spawn, right? But then the Krugs would spawn a couple seconds after the Raptor camp. So after Raptor camps, you can run directly to Krugs and it'll be there pretty much on the dot. Versus if you were to do Raptors, Red, and then Krugs, you would have to wait a little bit before the second Krugs respawn. The third benefit is that if you're planning on going to the opposite side of the map after you clear your red camps, this makes it a little bit more efficient because the path you're taking is Raptors, Krugs, Red, and then you can go bot side a little bit more smoothly, right? Versus before, if you were to do Raptors, Red, Krugs, you'd have to walk all the way back to your wolves, which isn't as efficient. And it's bleeding your red buff away. You're basically wasting red buff a little bit. The Raptors camp, I just want to highlight how important this camp is. If you watch more and more jungle VODs, you'll see how much junglers prioritize this camp. This camp is the most easy to steal / invade, right? Because it's not super deep. The deep camps are like Krugs, Wolves, where it's a lot harder if you're invading. They're deeper in enemy territory. The more shallow camps, the ones that are easier to take are the Raptor camp and then the Gromp camp. But the Gromp is so tanky that it's actually quite hard to steal. So that really just leaves the Raptor camp. The second reason is that it really dictates how the jungler paths in the early game. So you'll see in this game, Canyon, he's playing Volibear here. He finished clearing his blue camps and he's pathing topside now. His mid laner warded the enemy Raptors camp. The Raptor camp is still up and we don't see the Lee Sin actively doing the Raptor camp. You need to start to think a little bit about where the enemy jungler could be. Because we have vision of this Raptor camp, you can start to piece together what exactly the enemy jungler's path is. The first possibility, the enemy jungler did not start the Raptors camp, right? Obviously, because then the Raptor camp would be down. The second possibility is that the enemy started red buff, went to Krugs, and then it would be on Raptors. But we can rule this possibility out because you think about the pacing, right? Canyon already finished 3 camps. If the enemy jungler took this path, the Raptors should have been gone already. There's no way the enemy jungler is just clearing 2 camps when you're clearing 3 camps. That's kind of sus. The enemy jungler didn't gank bot either, right? So it's not like he's late to his 3rd camp. So that rules out the possibility of the enemy jungler starting red. So what does that mean? That means the enemy jungler has to have started blue and then he's pathing down. You can kind of mirror the pacing here, right? So as Canyon is hitting the Raptor camp, we should expect to see the enemy jungler on their respective Raptor camp in the next couple seconds. If we don't see the enemy jungler on the Raptor camp, it's a little bit questionable. The Canyon he's like, where the fuck is the enemy jungler, right? Like, he's almost done with his Raptor camp. And the enemy jungler is still not showing on the Raptor camp. But what could the enemy jungler be doing? He could have finished his topside 3 camps, hit level 3, and he could be looking for a gank on the TF or the Hui. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is that he knows the Hui warded his Raptor camp, and he wants to avoid vision, so he's intentionally dodging this vision and doing red buff first. And option 3 is, yeah, he's just running directly to bot. Right now, it is super fishy that the enemy jungler is not showing on his Raptors. You see here, Cannon is already like a third of the way done with his red camp, and then you finally see the Lee Sin on the enemy Raptor camp. So what the hell was this guy doing? You don't even have to left click on the minimap to see which buff the Lee Sin has, right? Because of this timing, like the Lee Sin has to have blue buff, and has 12 CS here, which means, you know, each jungle camp gives 4 CS, so that's something to know. He's just super late to his Raptor camp for some reason, so not sure what happened in the early game. Maybe the Lee Sin tried for a gank on the TF in the Hui, but decided it wasn't a good idea and backed off. Maybe he just messed up his clear, but he is really, really slow on his clear here. This is way, way, way slower than normal. What I'm trying to say with this example is because there's a ward on the enemy Raptor camp, you know exactly how the Lee Sin's going to path, right? So after this Raptor camp, where's Lee Sin going to be? He has to be on his bot side camps. And then after the first Scuttle Crab recall, you know that he's going to be topside again, right? That's the quote unquote problem with full clearing, is that you'll know exactly where the jungler is going to be. One other benefit of the Raptor camp start is you hit level 2 a lot faster, right? So by the time you finish this camp, if the enemy jungler started the buffs are harder to take, right? So by the time you finish the Raptor camp, the enemy jungler is still working on their buff. You see, this is a very interesting scenario. This might seem like a flip where Canyon is going to invade the enemy jungler's blue side camps, but you'll see in a sec that the enemy jungler is Sejuani, so you for sure win the 1v1. If the Sejuani is in fact starting her blue side camps, you should be on the Gromp by the time you reach her. You win that 1v1, so you can fight for the Gromp. Let's say the Sejuani didn't start blue and actually started red. Well, then you can just take her blue and her Gromp. And then by doing so, you're applying a lot of pressure bot because you're always bot side. And this game, you want to play for your Varus Ashe because they always want push. They always want to be harassing the enemy bot lane under turret. That's the idea here. So what's really interesting is you'll see here, you see, he EQs in confidently, right? Because his bot lane has decent prio, maybe not necessarily full prio. You can just look at the minimap, the wave states, right? Maybe not necessarily full prio, but they could support him if needed. So he can EQ in here very confidently. Same thing mid lane, pretty equilibrium state, maybe. The Tristana could probably move first, but he has time to get out. So yeah, you go for the EQ confidently here. You know you win the 1v1. What's really interesting here is that the blue buff is full HP, which means that Sejuani didn't start blue. So how the heck is she level 2? And this is something that you'll see in higher elo brackets, probably mainly pro play. I wouldn't say this really ever happened in solo queue, but it's really the same idea as starting Raptors, right? So Raptors gives you level 2 immediately, but so does the Wolf camp. As soon as you see Sejuani being level 2 here without blue buff being taken, you know for sure she started Wolves. You can rule out the possibility that she started Raptors, because if she went Raptors to her blue buff, she should be slower, right? This is a longer path to take than what Cannon did, which is his Raptor. So you can rule out that possibility. Yeah, look at the amount of pressure here. If you are the enemy bot lane here, just think about how much pressure you're feeling, right? Your enemy jungler is being pushed out of their own jungle. You guys are stuck under turret, and you guys are going to get railed on by the Varus and the Ashe. You're actually under the threat of a potential dive, right? It's probably not going to happen because the Sejuani's here, but the pressure is there nonetheless. That is one example of how the early level 2 can help. I want to talk a little bit about just how important the Wolf camp and the Raptor camp are if you're being invaded. You see in this game, Cannon, he's playing Jax. He wants to start blue. In a second here, he gets invaded by the enemy top laner. Okay, this is not the enemy jungler. This can very well happen in your solo queue games, right? Why can't this happen? Enemy Garen is invading him. He's actually beating the shit out of him, right?
여기 갑자기 왜 이렇게 돼?
He has phase rush, so he gets away. It's very annoying as a jungler. Your start is delayed. You're half HP already. You're forced to use your potion. What do you do in this situation? Your Aatrox actually shouldn't have come here because level 1 Aatrox, what is he going to do to the Garen? There's no shot he kills the Garen. So what the Aatrox should have done is just stay on the wave. What you should do, you back off your blue buff. If you go back on the blue buff, there's a chance that the Garen comes back and does the same thing. Obviously, he is losing creeps in his own lane, but you know, why can't he do the same thing? So what do you do in Cannon's position? Do you run directly to your red buff? The problem with running directly to your red buff is, well, it's super inefficient. By the time you start your red buff, it'd probably be like 2 o'clock. And the second point is, why would you do red buff when you can just do the wolves here and hit level 2 that way? You see, he does wolves here, hits level 2. After the wolf camp, where should you path? You could go back to your camp's top side. There's a number of reasons why it's better to go bot side. You have more camps bot side, first of all. Like, you want to play for bot because you have Nautilus support versus double range. So that lane's going to be really bloody. So yeah, the move is to go to your bot side. So you'll see in a couple seconds here, a lot of people would take Raptors as their second camp here because, you know, it's efficient. on the way, right? But Canyon actually doesn't do that. He runs straight to his red buff. Why is that? And the reason for that is the enemy top laner was the one who invaded him. The enemy jungler got to start his camps on time. But he knows that Canyon started his camps late, and he knows that Canyon is chunked because the Garen chunked him so hard and forced his potion early. So by going to his red buff second, you're actually protecting yourself from a potential invade. As the enemy Lee Sin here, you know that you're going to be clearing faster than the Jax. The enemy Lee Sin is probably close to finishing up his second camp, moving on to his third camp, just based on the timing. Normally, if junglers start at the same time, they should finish camps around the same time. Obviously, some junglers are faster at clearing, but this is the general rule of thumb, right? So the enemy Lee Sin should be somewhere here, probably finishing up his second camp at this stage of the game. Typically, junglers don't start invading or looking for ganks until they're level 3, which involves 3 camps. And we can go over which specific 3 camps later. But doing the red buff second, you are guaranteeing that the Lee Sin won't be contesting your red buff because he is still doing his camps trying to get level 3 as fast as possible. Versus if you were to do Raptor second and then red third, there's a very, very strong chance that the Lee Sin could be here because he is clearing a lot faster and then you're putting yourself in a very, very dangerous spot. It takes a red buff here. Where do you path next? So the question is, do you go to your Raptors or your Krugs next? The reason you go to your Krugs as your third camp is because it gets you level 3. If you were to go to your Raptors camp, it actually doesn't give you level 3. So if you want to hit level 3 with just one buff, you need either the Gromp camp or the Krugs camp. Let's say if you do blue, wolves, and Raptors, you actually won't be level 3. And then this game, if you did wolves, Raptors, and red, you also won't be level 3. With one buff, you need the Gromp or the Krugs camp to hit level 3. Level 3, in honestly any lane, it's super important because it gives you access to all of your basic abilities, which is huge. That gives you a much higher probability of a gank working out, and it makes you a lot stronger. One more jungle start path that I want to go over is the Red Raptors Gromp. So as a jungler, you want to be thinking about which lanes you want to prioritize and focus on. This game, he has Wave Blitzcrank bot versus double range carry. If the Blitzcrank doesn't land his hook, they're going to get absolutely blasted. If the ranged players are good, they will hard shit on the lane. Then the question is like, why do you even pick Blitzcrank? Because if the Blitzcrank lands the hook, then the range carries will die. So he wants to path bot because he wants to make that a little bit easier. He wants to make that happen. So what's actually the fastest way bot? We talked before about how broken the red buff is as a jungler. So if you want to path bot, you want to start red here, but you want to be bot as fast as possible. So if you do red, Krugs, Raptors, that's one way you can hit level 3 also going bot, but it's actually slower than if you were to do red, Raptors, Gromp. That'll also give you level 3, and then you'll actually be bot faster than if you were to do red, Krugs, and Raptors. Play it out here. Red, Raptors, and then Gromp. So here, after the Gromp camp, he hits 3. He theoretically could go bot right now, but his Blitzcrank's still level 1. I'm sure the Blitzcrank's about to hit level 2 because the Hui is already level 2, but he's making the call that he'd rather just farm. I think his intention was to cover a potential dive, if anything, and that dive is not happening right now, so he'd rather just farm. But yeah, that's the idea of the red Raptor Gromp start. One more example here. Pretty finished red buff. He's on Raptor camp. This is his second camp. But same idea here where, his bot lane is pretty engage reliant, and then it's also versus double range. What typically happens in higher elo brackets is the double ranged duo will harass the shit out of the Camille and the Draven because they have range advantage, and then the enemy jungler will path and then potentially dive. This probably won't happen in solo queue because players are not as good, but you'll see this happen all the time in pro play where the double range duo, they're stacking waves so that the dive can happen very smoothly. So by doing red Raptors Gromp, you are trying to be bot side as fast as possible while hitting level 3, and you can cover that dive. As you're doing the Gromp, you should look at the lanes, but you already know that your bot lane's good. Sometimes you don't even have to look at the lane. Just look at the minimap. They're not under turret, obviously. They're both really healthy. So his bot lane is doing a really good job. You can just continue farming. One question you could ask yourself is, why don't you just go for the gank here? You're level 3 and your Camille ready to go. Well, there's a very good chance that the enemy jungler is here as well and waiting for the counter gank. It's just a lot safer to just farm. The time where you would skip blue buff after Gromp and go directly for a gank bot is if the lane is like really volatile. If the Zeri and the Lulu were like pretty low, then it's worth ganking. But like in this state where the Zeri and Lulu are full HP, it's very, very hard to kill. And then if the enemy junglers there, you guys are probably screwed because you're not using your abilities as carefully. One more thing I want to highlight is just the importance of looking at lanes as a jungler. That really dictates when you should gank versus when you should farm. So like this game, you'll see Owner's path was he did Blue Gromp Wolves. He's about to hit 3 off the Wolves. He technically could gank right now, but the closest lanes to him are top and mid Don't really see him gankable right now. So just keep farming. Go to your bot side, keep farming. But right here, he gets an assist me ping from his bot lane. Even if he didn't get this ping, he should still look. But the point is, he's going to look at the state of the bot lane here, right? Look how low the enemy bot lane is. I think a lot of Jarvans in solo queue would just autopilot and just like full clear. But there's an opportunity to dive them if you just walk straight here. If you meet the enemy jungler here, you're fine. Your bot lane has prio, so they can help you if need be. The best thing to do here is you need to look at the lane, right? Obviously, this is super killable, but you want to look at the wave state. By the time you get here and you're ready to dive, you need to ask yourself if your team is going to have enough creeps to sustain this dive. Let's say your team didn't have these 4 creeps before the next minion wave is coming, and the wave is like pretty much in an equilibrium state. You still want to dive, but you have more time. You could do one more Raptor camp and then come. Like you want to arrive when the big minion wave arrives. That makes the dive a lot safer and less scuffed. But right now, the wave state is super good. It's going to run directly there. Enemy Jax is on the same page because he's looking at the lane. Enemy Jax unfortunately gets 2 kills, but you can just imagine if Owner wasn't here, it would have been a 0 for 2. Just think about that. How bad is that? 0 for 2 when your bot lane is hard shitting on them. If Owner wasn't here. If you autopiloted and you went Raptors Red, it would have been 0 for 2. Like, it's so bad. But because he's here, he's ready to save the day. Just want to be alert when you're playing jungle. You want to be looking at lanes, thinking about whether it's gankable or not. As you get better and better at jungle, you want to start thinking about potential dives as well. I know dives are really scary because people are scared about them going terribly wrong. You just want to have like a little checklist before you go for the dive, right? Like, is the wave state good? Do you guys have enough damage to kill them? Do you guys need to dive them, twice? Like, you need to go through 2 spell rotations in order to dive them? Where is the enemy jungler? All these sorts of things. That's something that I think will help you get to the next level. Okay, that's all I have for today. I hope this was helpful in some way. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.